Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be doing a review of Yellowface by RF Kuang. I got this as an e-arc as well. I got approved for quite a few e-arcs recently and I just kind of have been reading them as they've come through. I've been really enjoying and I think it's a really great opportunity to kind of read books before they come out. The downside of that is that nobody else has read them or very few people have read them and so you can't really discuss them with anybody. But I thought it would be good to get my reviews out so that you folks can kind of get a sense of what they're about and so that you can pre-order them or not pre-order them or cancel your pre-order if you so wish. So I requested Yellowface, another arc that I didn't think I was going to get because, you know, it's RF Kuang. She's a very popular fantasy author. And so I didn't think I was going to get approved, but there we go. I did get approved and it's a really short book. It's under 300 pages. It's like 250, 260 pages. It's a story about a woman whose friend dies and she steals her book and publishes it under her own name. I'm not going to say anything beyond that because I don't want to give any spoilers whatsoever. I feel like it's one of those books that you need to go into it knowing a minimal amount about it and just go along with it for the ride because my gosh, is it a ride. Now bear in mind, this was my first RF Kuang. I've not read The Poppy War, I've not read Babel, I've not read anything. I actually own all of her books in some type of format, but I've just not got around to them. Poppy War was so hyped. You know, a lot of people described it as grimdark to me, but then when I actually like delved a little bit deeper, it didn't seem like it was actually grimdark. I know there's dark elements, but just because there's dark elements doesn't necessarily mean it's grimdark. So I haven't read that. I've wanted the hype to die down, and I think it's maybe a series that I'll get to next year. And then Babel obviously came out last year, which I do own a copy of, but I have zero intention of picking up that book anytime soon, even after loving this book, Yellowface. So what did I love about Yellowface? There's so many things I really liked about Yellowface. The pacing is perfection. It reads almost like a thriller. I was sat on the edge of my seat as I was reading this book because I really wanted to know what was going to happen next. You feel like something is about to go wrong at any given moment. There's also this incredible amount of tension because we know something is going to go wrong and that she is going to get discovered at some point. It's inevitable. And yet we don't know when. We have zero indication of when. And I was just actually quite worried for her, even though I think she's a really despicable character. She's also a very human character. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, this woman is about to go down at any given moment. And I loved it. I really, really loved it. Following on from that, another thing that I really loved was her writing in this book. I don't know what her writing is like in The Poppy War. I don't know what it's like in Babel. I've heard it's quite academic in the latter. But in this one, the writing just flows really beautifully. It's very kind of quippy in a way. Like, I don't really know how else to describe it. The way that it's almost quite conversational. It's almost like you're reading someone's diary is quite interesting. It's quite intimate. You feel like you know the kind of characters quite well, especially the main character that we're following. It feels like you're delving deep into this person's psyche, but not in a way that feels like you're intruding almost. I don't know about you guys, but I've read like first person books. I've read books kind of with like a similar vibe, but it almost feels like you're intruding on the main character. But it just felt like we were getting her life thoughts. Her thoughts are very realistic as well. She's a very realistic character, which brings me on to what I loved next. I really loved the way that she characterized the main character. She was a very compelling individual, very morally grey, very human, very flawed. And I really loved the fact that I feel like anybody in her situation could have done one of two things. And I feel like 50% of people would probably have done what she would have done, maybe even more. And that in a way makes her feel quite relatable. She's despicable, don't get me wrong. And I definitely don't agree with anything that she does in this book, but she feels very human, very raw, very unfiltered. And I think she was quite a memorable character. There's this very interesting kind of backdrop of kind of race and the role of women and the role of like the authorial voice in this book. And I think the fact that it was kind of manifested in this character was quite interesting because we kind of saw the other side of it. And I'm going to come back to that in a second because the thematic work is the thing that really carries this book. This book is about authorial voice. It's about who can tell what stories. Now, our main character is a white woman, a young white woman, and she steals the manuscript of this book that is written by a Chinese American. And when her book gets published, the question that comes up is, who is she to write this story? Who is she to write the story of the struggle of Chinese soldiers in World War II. She can't relate to that because she's a white woman. How could she possibly identify with these people and write these people in a compelling way? And I think that's just quite an interesting topic. I think I've definitely watched videos on YouTube of people saying that can white people write stories of black people? Can straight people write stories of gay people? I don't have the answer to that question. I recently read a book about a Muslim woman being a hero, and I found out that it was written by a white man, but he wrote her in a really compelling way. And I don't think, personally, that should have stopped him from writing that character, because again, she was written in a very compelling way. But then there are obviously certain topics that are very sensitive, and that, especially, when we look at it through the lens of historical events, and it does bring up the question, can someone who doesn't represent a certain race or a certain gender, or insert, kind of parameter here, can they write that story? I kind of changed my mind multiple times throughout the book, which I thought in itself was quite interesting. I'm not going to tell you where I landed because I want more people to read this book, and then, we can all talk about it. But that as a backdrop to this was really fascinating, and I think it was captured really well. She does ask the question, why can't I write a book like this? Why can't I represent this story? It's ultimately just historical events, and anybody can take anything from history and write and write a book about it, which, may or may not be the right way to think about it. So I love that. I love that kind of whole question, that whole topic of ultimately of like, who can tell what stories, because it's something that I personally go back and forth on. The other kind of key theme, there's lots of like thematic work here, but I would say that's kind of key theme number one. And then I would say key theme number two for me was that this kind of idea of celebrity and getting fame and getting money, the kind of danger of that. Our main character, prior to publishing her friend's manuscript, well, she edits it, to be fair to her, she does edit it quite a lot, and then she publishes it under her name. But prior to that, she has had very poor success with her previous books. I think she published like 1 or 2 books and they basically bombed. So she's not a kind of critically or commercially successful author. And so, she sees her friend, the friend that she steals the book from, is done very well for herself. They're the same age, she's done very well for herself. She's written book upon book upon book that has come to critical and commercial success. She's earned a lot of money. She's got a lot of followers on Twitter and Instagram, which apparently is a currency these days. It's just a really interesting dichotomy between these two characters, to see one who's very successful and one who's not. And when she publishes the manuscript, she starts to get a lot of praise. And the way that she falls into it, the way that she falls into the trap of celebrity and influence is really well done. When you have that kind of inevitable climb, there's also that inevitable fall that is kind of coming around the corner. She kind of, shoots herself in the foot. She almost kind of cancels herself, which I think is quite interesting. I really just like the way that it was represented. I thought it felt quite real. I feel like the way that she describes it in the book is quite similar to the way that I've seen certain authors rise and fall in the public eye before. And so it felt, very authentic. And again, I like that kind of discussion around, what are people willing to do to kind of get their name out there and to get money and fame and kind of all of that, which I personally couldn't relate to. But there we go. So I really enjoyed this book overall. I mean, there's so many things that I loved about it. I just loved the writing, the pacing, the characters were interesting, the plot was interesting, the thematic work was interesting. Like, there was a lot of stuff that was done right. I think the only thing that I didn't like was the fact that there was like a little bit in the middle that just kind of felt, I don't know, it didn't either need to be there, or I don't know, we could have even gone a little bit deeper. I just felt like it was quite surface level. There were parts where I was like, okay, I feel like this could have done with a bit of tightening, but it didn't necessarily, impact my overall reading experience. Like I gave it a 4.5 stars. I think it was like a really solid story that I think should be told as well. And I have a suspicion that, RF Kuang is maybe relating to her own experiences in this story. I would love to hear her talk about that more, and maybe once we get closer to the publication date, she will, because I'd be really curious to hear about her experiences publishing her books, and I suspect that was the inspiration for this story. So do I recommend it? Absolutely. Really short, it reads very quickly, lots of interesting things happening in the book, lots of really compelling things about the book, and you should definitely give it a go. I also think it's a really decent place to start with Kuang because it's very accessible and you're not committing to like a trilogy. I suspect her writing in her other books is quite different. It was a good place for me to start, and now I am very curious about her other books and I'll probably bump them up higher in my TBR. So there we have it. Nobody's going to have read this book, or very few people will have read it, but as always, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, I'd love to hear them down below, and so I'll see you there. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.